What are the musical features that aid sleep? Now, if you're wanting to use music successfully as a sleep aid, some of my research has found that specific musical features are associated with helping sleep. In this video, we're going to go through a paper that a colleague and I published on the musical features that are associated with aiding sleep. I'm also going to discuss what these musical features mean, how to choose pieces of music that have these features, and also some general tips and tricks on using music with these features. I'm Dr. Thomas Dixon, expert in the science of music. Here at Biohacking with Music, I'm going to show you how to use music as a tool to thrive. So my colleague Emery Schubert and I recently published a paper that looked at the pieces that individuals had successfully used for sleep and compared them against the songs the participants had used that were unsuccessful in helping them sleep. And what we found was that when we compared these 200 to 300 pieces was that there were specific musical features that were associated with music that aided sleep, and the contrary, that there were features that were associated with music that didn't help individuals sleep. So ideally, you want to be using music and songs with the features that have been successful in aiding sleep. Now, in this study, we compared a wide variety of different musical features. These included tempo, whether it had lyrics, whether the piece had percussion, the key of the piece, the genres, and many other features. And these features were darkness, sustain, and non-danceable rhythms. Now, I'll break each of these three down. Now, the first one is darkness. Now, the scientific term for this was a lower mean spectral centroid frequency, which is a bit of a mouthful. But in essence, what this is that when we compared all the frequencies over the entire duration of a song, songs that had more medium to lower frequencies were associated with pieces that were successful in aiding sleep, whereas pieces that had higher frequencies were associated with not helping listeners fall asleep. So what makes a piece have higher frequencies as opposed from lower frequencies? Well, we can look at this in a couple of ways. The first way is the arrangement of the piece. So if the piece has lots of lower instruments, say for example, double basses and cellos and violas, as opposed from instruments playing in higher registers, such as violins playing harmonics, or it could even be things like piccolo flute, which is a higher register sound, these lower sounds were associated with pieces of music that were successful in aiding sleep. Now, in addition to the register in which the instruments play, whether it's low or high, there's also the overall mix. For example, you can record a piece of music and turn down the higher frequencies in post-production. So this might be where, for example, the higher frequencies are made quieter in post-production and the lower to medium frequencies are boosted to be louder. If you're interested in this a little bit further, you may want to look at the Fletcher-Munson curve, which shows that higher to middle frequencies our ears are more sensitive to, and that lower frequencies our ears are less sensitive to. Now, the second musical feature was sustain. Now, the actual measure we used in the study was how long the notes went from peak amplitude to low amplitude. But for those of you who aren't musicians or particularly don't have a music information retrieval background, this is how quickly the note goes from full volume to quiet. This could be things such as sustain. For example, if you're using a piano, you might put down a sustain pedal and the notes will ring longer. Or it could be reverb or echoes. For example, if you play a sound in a cave, it's going to last longer than if you played it in an open space. And for those of you who are musicians, you might call this a legato played style or a slurred play style, where the notes are sustained and then joined together. Now, these types of sounds were the ones that were found in pieces that had been successfully used for sleep, whereas the staccato sounds, the short sounds, those with a very quick loudness to silence amplitude, were prominent in pieces that were unsuccessfully used for sleep. The final musical feature was what I've called non-danceability. So what we looked at there was the rhythmic activity of the pieces. So those pieces that had medium to high rhythmic activity, which we deemed as pieces that had a strong pulse, had things such as like polyrhythms, where the grooves are against each other, strong swing, or strong syncopation, these very rhythmic, percussive type rhythms were associated with pieces that were unsuccessful in aiding sleep, whereas the music that didn't have particularly strong rhythms or the rhythm wasn't that prominent were the pieces that were successful in aiding sleep. So quite simply, we deem these as danceable music with the intention for dancing and has these danceable grooves versus the music that is not intended for dancing, so not having these danceable rhythms and grooves and polyrhythms. So how will you actually choose music with these features? The first one is really easy. When it comes to looking for pieces that have more lower frequencies than high frequencies, we can just use our ears. Another strategy could be choosing instruments that have a tendency to sit in a certain register. For example, cello music is more likely to be in a lower register, say, than violin, and the same with bass flute as opposed from piccolo. Sustained is a little bit more difficult, but you could listen to recordings that have the impression that they sounded like they're recorded in a cave or a highly reverberous space, or you could just listen for notes that seem to go on for a long time. A lot of ambient and drone music tends to have very sustained notes. And judging whether the music is danceable or not is as simple as tapping your foot to it. If you're tapping your foot to it or the music makes you feel like you want to get up and dance or groove along to it, then it's likely to be a piece of music that's high rhythmic activity, whereas music that you're less inclined to tap your foot to is more like the pieces that were associated with successful sleep. Now, the other option is that you could take a piece of music and change a little bit so that it's more in these styles. For example, you can easily get an equalizer and turn down the higher registers. So if you were to turn down everything over, say, 2 kilohertz down by a little bit, that will make the overall piece sound lower frequency. The next option could be to slow the piece down. So if you had a tool like Audacity, you could stretch the piece of music, which would slow it down. And by slowing down the piece, you would increase the duration of those notes. When it comes to choosing music with non-danceable rhythms, it's actually quite difficult to take a piece that has strong rhythms and remove them. You'd need to use a digital audio workstation with sidechaining to remove those danceable rhythms. In this video, we've covered some research that my colleague and I did on the musical features that are associated with successful sleep. We've also gone through how to identify those features, what those musical features consist of, and some additional tips and tricks around changing the music to be more consistent with those musical features. If you want more information on how you can use music to change your life, please follow or subscribe. And if you have a friend or colleague who you feel would benefit from using music as a sleep aid, please share this video with them. Thank you.